This happened a few winters ago. I had just finalized my divorce about 6 months earlier, and to put it lightly, I needed a reset. Christina, my girlfriend at the time, suggested we take a trip somewhere quiet, something different from the chaos I'd been dealing with. We found a rental on a lake in upstate New York, and I booked it for a week without much thought. The place was exactly what I was looking for, a modern but cozy house positioned right on the lake, surrounded by woods, with only a handful of other properties scattered along the shoreline. Most of them were empty. It wasn't exactly peak season for lakefront living. I welcomed that, though. I really just wanted to be as far from civilization as possible. The host wasn't going to be there, but he gave us some detailed instructions on where to find the keys, some stuff about the house, all the standard Airbnb stuff. We arrived in the morning, and when we got there was a small package sitting on the front steps, waiting for us. There was no return address, just a little handwritten note that said, "Enjoy your stay. Make sure to stay warm." That part was kind of cute, but there was something else in the package, a tiny box of matches. We figured it was some kind of welcome gift. A weird one, but harmless enough. Christina laughed and made a joke about how the upstate people have always been a little odd, and that was that. The next 2 days were exactly what we wanted: long hikes through the snow, hot drinks by the fireplace, total peace and quiet. Oh yeah, I should probably mention that the snow had been steadily falling since we arrived. Not quite a blizzard, because there wasn't that much wind or fog, but there was enough snow to make the landscape feel untouched. It was perfect. I think it's a good time to describe the layout of the house. The master bedroom where we slept was on the second floor. It had these massive windows across from the bed that overlooked the lake. The roof, or at least the windows, must have been pretty thin because we could hear the patter of snowflakes from inside, which was a really nice touch. There was also a skylight in there, so we could fall asleep to the beautiful sky and snow. Sometime after midnight on the third night, I woke up to a sound. It was barely audible over the sound of the wind and the snow. The first thing I noticed was actually the storm. The snowfall had gotten considerably heavier since I had fallen asleep, and the outdoors was starting to resemble more of a blizzard. I shifted my focus back to the sound and realized why it stuck out. It sounded man-made, almost mechanical, unlike the natural sounds you'd expect to hear out in the wilderness. I quietly got out of bed, careful not to wake up Christina, and made my way across the room. I looked out the window and saw the last thing I expected to see, a snowmobile. It was moving slowly across the ice. I know it's not the most abnormal thing. People drive snowmobiles on frozen lakes all the time, but I was just so confused given how late it was. Like I said, the snow was falling more heavily now, so visibility wasn't great, but I could still make out the shape. The driver was moving cautiously, like they weren't completely sure about the ice, and then they just stopped entirely. I watched as the person climbed off and started waving their hands like they were in distress. It looked like they were shouting, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. To my horror, I realized that they were facing in the direction of our house. Did they know we were there? It was impossible. Either way, it looked like they needed help, so I woke Christina and told her what was happening. Then, I got dressed, went downstairs, and stepped outside onto the deck. It was freezing, even with the layers I was wearing. As soon as I opened the door, I got hit with another surprise. The person on the ice was a woman. I could tell because she was shouting for help, saying, "Thank God someone's there," and repeating that she lost her little boy somewhere in the snowstorm. It sounded like she was crying, or borderline hysterical. It wasn't a question of whether or not I'd help. If there was a child out there in that weather all alone, they weren't going to last long. I laced my boots and made my way toward the lake, telling Christina to stay inside. As I approached the woman, I started to make out more details of her appearance. She was bundled up in a thick fur coat, and her hair was pulled back into a tight braid. The ice was completely solid. There wasn't even a chance of falling through. So I started to relax, knowing that it would have been impossible for that little boy to have fallen through. As I got closer, she started saying that he had run away from home and that she was looking for him. That statement gave me some pause. I had expected her to say something like he had fallen off her snowmobile, and she hadn't noticed. And then I started to think about how ridiculous even that story was. How the hell do you not notice your own kid falling off a snowmobile? The adrenaline must have been clouding my judgment, because I hadn't even thought about that until right then. I was just about to ask her for more details, when she said something that literally made me freeze. She asked me if I still got those matches, and I could tell she was smiling. For a split second, I had no idea what she was talking about. And then it all clicked at once. The matches. That package from the first day. The note. She had left it, not our host. Before I could react, she reached into her coat and pulled out a gun. She demanded my wallet and phone, and I gave them to her. I had no other choice. The whole interaction happened within the span of not even 30 seconds. Without another word, she climbed back onto the snowmobile and disappeared into the whiteout. As she was speeding away, I turned toward the house and ran as fast as I could on the ice, shouting for Christina to call the police the whole time. She was already on the phone with them when I finally made it back to the house. I locked the doors and paced the room, still shaking. I kept looking outside, half expecting to see that snowmobile circling back. The cops showed up about an hour later. By that point, the fresh snowfall had already covered any tracks that woman had left behind. Christina was hysterical, but I was mostly angry. After the woman disappeared into the snowstorm, leaving only the faint echo of her snowmobile's roar in the distance, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread sinking into my bones. The fresh snowfall that covered everything like a blanket was both comforting and suffocating. It felt as though the snow had erased everything that had happened, every trace of the woman, her snowmobile, and the unsettling encounter we had just experienced. Christina was frantic, her voice trembling as she dialed the police, recounting what happened. As I stood there pacing in the kitchen, waiting for the authorities to arrive, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't done with this story, that somehow, something darker was brewing. How could that woman have known we were there? Why go through such an elaborate ruse just to rob us? When the police arrived, it had been over an hour since the woman vanished. The snow had covered any potential tracks she had left behind. The officers combed the area but found nothing. No snowmobile tracks leading to the house. No sign of the woman except for her frantic shout for help that I'd heard so clearly. It was like she had simply vanished. They did a cursory check of the area, but to my disappointment, they couldn't come up with anything. They speculated she must have come from a nearby property on the lake, one of the empty homes that littered the shoreline. They mentioned an old boat ramp on the far side of the lake, something that might explain how she got there unnoticed, though it didn't answer how she knew we were staying there, or why she targeted us. With a defeated sigh, they told me there was nothing else they could do. They had no leads, no suspects, and no evidence to pursue. It was a robbery, plain and simple, and all they could do was file a report and move on. But I couldn't just let it go. The next morning, I set off on my own search. Christina wasn't having it. She was terrified and wanted to leave, but something kept gnawing at me. I had to know what happened. I tried to get in touch with the Airbnb host, but the man had disappeared without a trace. His number was disconnected, and there was no way to contact him. I checked the listings again, but the property was no longer available. It felt as if the house, the host, and the entire incident had been wiped from existence. I spent hours driving around the perimeter of the lake, peering through snow-covered windows of vacant houses, trying to make sense of it all. I even called in a few local services to help track down anything unusual. But as the day wore on, I realized I wasn't going to find any answers, not here, not now. That night, as I lay awake in bed, I kept thinking about the woman's smile when she mentioned the matches. It was something about the way she said it, like she knew something about me, or something about that package, that no one else should have known. The more I thought about it, the more it started to make sense. She wasn't just a random thief. She had been watching us. And she had a plan. Several months passed after the strange robbery, but the fear never really left. Christina and I tried to move on with our lives, but every time I closed my eyes, I could still see the silhouette of that woman on the ice, shouting for help, and then the gun. And the matches. Then one evening, a surprising call came. It was from the Airbnb host. His voice was unrecognizable, shaky and filled with urgency. "I need you to listen to me," he said before I even had a chance to speak. "I don't have much time. You were right about everything. The woman who came to your house, she's part of something bigger. Something dark." He paused, and I could hear the sound of his breath on the other side of the line. "Don't go back there. It's not just a house. It's a trap. And they're always watching." Before I could ask more questions, the line went dead. The call had been cut off abruptly. The sudden and unexpected call filled me with a mix of dread and determination. What had he meant by always watching? Who was he talking about? The more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just a random robbery gone wrong. There was something orchestrated, something planned. Christina and I both agreed that we should never go back to that place. But the call, his voice was so haunting, and the cryptic warning was enough to convince me that I couldn't leave it at that. I had to understand what was happening. But I didn't want to do it alone. It took some convincing, but Christina finally agreed to return to the lake house with me, though she was adamant about being cautious. We made preparations, but there was a gnawing feeling in my gut that something awaited us there, something far worse than we could imagine. But we both knew that this was the only way to get closure. We arrived in the dead of winter again. The snow had begun to fall as we pulled up to the house, the air thick with silence, except for the occasional rustle of the wind. The house loomed over us, the same eerie silence settling over everything. There was no welcome package this time, no odd little notes. Just the quiet whisper of the trees, swaying under the weight of the snow. But everything felt different. The house seemed to watch us as we walked toward it. As we entered, the house felt colder than before, unnaturally so. The warmth from the fireplace that had welcomed us on our previous trip was now absent, replaced by a bone-chilling cold that seemed to seep into the walls. I walked around, cautiously checking every corner, every door, every window, but everything seemed untouched. I went upstairs to the master bedroom, where we had slept the first time. The room was just as I remembered it, the huge windows that overlooked the lake, the skylight, the bed. Yet, something was off. It was like the walls had absorbed the events of that night, and it felt as if the room was holding its breath, waiting. Suddenly, I heard a creak from the hallway. I froze. Christina's footsteps echoed faintly behind me, but then, there was another sound. A soft, almost inaudible scraping sound. It was as if something or someone was moving in the house with us. I turned, my heart racing. But when I looked back at Christina, she was already staring at the door. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded. There was no denying it. Something was here. Something that wasn't supposed to be. I grabbed a flashlight from the nightstand, and we crept down the hallway. Each step felt like an eternity as I tried to listen for any hint of what was happening. The house felt alive, as if it was waiting for us to make a mistake. We stopped near the staircase when we heard it again, a low scraping sound, like nails on wood. Then we saw it. The attic door, which had been closed tightly earlier, was now ajar, and through the crack, I could see a faint flickering light. A shadow moved quickly across the floor inside, just out of reach of the light. Without saying a word, I motioned for Christina to stay back. I climbed the stairs slowly, cautiously, every sense alert to the possibility of danger. As I reached the attic, I could hear breathing. Soft, labored. It didn't sound human. I slowly opened the door, the old wood creaking under my weight. The room inside was dark, with only the flickering light illuminating the shadows in strange, unsettling ways. My flashlight swept over the room, and that's when I saw it. There, in the corner of the attic, was the man, the disfigured man. The one who had been in the house before us, the one who had terrified us all those months ago. He was standing, hunched, his hands pressed against the wall. He turned slowly, his face pale, his eyes wide and unblinking. "Why are you back?" he croaked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Suddenly, the floor creaked behind me. I turned just in time to see Christina step into the room, but she wasn't alone. A woman, her face twisted with rage, was right behind her. The woman I had seen on the snowmobile. Her gun gleamed in the dim light as she stepped closer. "I told you not to come back," she said, her voice low and cold. The man in the corner cackled, a disturbing sound that filled the attic. "They're always watching, always waiting." He grinned, his eyes glinting with something more sinister than madness. "You should have stayed away." As the woman's cold gaze met mine, I felt the room close in around me. My pulse raced, and every instinct screamed for me to run. Yet, there was nowhere to go. The attic was small, the only exit behind us was blocked by the disfigured man, who had now taken a few steps forward with a strange, satisfied look on his face. Christina stepped back, her breathing shallow and fast. She looked at me, eyes wide with terror. The flickering light above us, cast from a single, old-fashioned lamp in the corner, did nothing to alleviate the sense of impending doom. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to remain calm. I had to know. I had to understand why all of this was happening. The woman sneered. "You should have left when you had the chance. You're too curious for your own good," she said with venom in her voice. "You never should have come back." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "What is this place? Who are you?" I pressed, hoping that somehow, hearing the words would shed light on the nightmare we'd found ourselves in. She laughed, the sound unnerving and hollow. "This house, it's more than just walls and windows. It's a living thing, a part of something ancient, something that should never have been disturbed." Her words hung in the air like an omen, and I could feel a deep unease settle in my chest. The disfigured man stepped forward, his ragged breath audible in the silence. He looked at me, his eyes wide and unblinking, his smile twisted in a grotesque mockery of joy. "It's been waiting," he rasped, the words barely audible. "Waiting for you." The air around us seemed to thicken, as though the very space was pulling us in, suffocating us with its malevolent presence. The room felt like it was closing in, the walls pressing against me. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the puzzle pieces that were slowly falling into place. Then I remembered the matches. The strange package we had received on our first day. The note with the cryptic message. It was all connected, but I couldn't piece it together yet. "Why did you leave the package?" I asked, the question escaping me before I could think. It was as though I had unlocked some part of the mystery by asking. The woman's lips curled into a wicked grin, and she stepped closer, her hand tightening around the gun in her grip. "You weren't supposed to come back. We gave you the warning. The matches were just the beginning." Her words hit me like a cold wave, and I understood with sickening clarity that this had never been a simple robbery. This was something far darker, and now, we were part of it. I looked at Christina, who was trembling beside me, her face pale. She hadn't spoken a word since we entered the attic, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Without warning, the disfigured man lunged at us, faster than I thought possible. He grabbed Christina, pulling her toward him with surprising strength. I reacted instinctively, rushing forward to try and break free, but the woman raised her gun and pointed it at me. "You're not going anywhere," she hissed. "Not until we finish what was started." In that moment, a surge of panic rushed through me. Everything was happening too quickly. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to think of a way out, but I knew that if we didn't act fast, we wouldn't get out alive. Adrenaline flooded my veins, and without thinking, I rushed toward Christina and the disfigured man, desperate to save her. But as I lunged forward, I felt the woman's hand on my shoulder, pushing me back with surprising force. "Stop!" she yelled, her voice filled with fury. "You don't understand. You were never meant to survive this." Her eyes glowed with a madness that was both terrifying and intoxicating. Suddenly, the disfigured man turned his head, his eyes wide with something I couldn't quite place, fear, perhaps. He shook his head frantically and let go of Christina. "Get out of here!" he screamed, his voice desperate. "You have to leave before it's too late." I froze. For a moment, everything stood still. The woman's expression faltered, a flicker of doubt passing across her face. And that was when I realized the truth. They weren't in control of the situation. Whatever force had drawn us here, whatever malevolent presence had been waiting for us, was stronger than both of them. Before either of us could react, the attic lights flickered and then went out completely, plunging us into darkness. The temperature in the room dropped suddenly, and a loud, eerie creaking sound echoed through the walls. Christina grabbed my arm, her voice shaking. "What's happening? What's going on?" she whispered. I didn't have an answer. The darkness around us was absolute, and I could feel someone watching us from the shadows. The woman and the man seemed to sense it too, their panic palpable. Then, there was a sound like a low, rumbling growl coming from deep within the walls. The floor beneath our feet trembled, and the entire house seemed to groan under some unseen weight. And that's when we realized. It wasn't the woman or the man who had been watching us. It was the house itself. The walls seemed to shift, and the ceiling above us creaked, as if the house was alive, as if it were waking from a long slumber. The floorboards began to buckle, and a dark mist rose from the corners of the room, swirling around us like a living thing. The air grew thick with an oppressive force, pressing in on us from all sides. The woman screamed, her voice rising in terror as the mist reached for her. She tried to run, but the floor buckled beneath her, sending her crashing to the ground. The disfigured man, too, struggled to stand, but his body was quickly overtaken by the thick, dark fog. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, everything stopped. The mist dissipated, the rumbling ceased, and the house fell silent once more. It was as if the house had devoured them whole, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. I turned to Christina, my breath coming in sharp gasps. "We need to go," I said, my voice strained. "Now." We didn't wait for any more signs, any more warnings. We ran, with no plan, no direction, just the desperate need to escape. The house seemed to fight against us, its walls pressing in, its hallways stretching endlessly, but somehow, we made it to the door. I yanked it open, and we ran into the night, the snow falling heavily around us. The cold air stung my lungs, but I didn't care. We were free. As we made our way to the car, I turned to look back at the house. It stood silent and still, like any other house on the lake. but I knew what it truly was, a trap, a living entity that had been waiting for us. And as I looked back at Christina, her face pale in the moonlight, I knew one thing for certain: we would never return.